Thank you, Mr. President. Last night, we had a hearing on E12 in which a budget proposal that is 0.3%, so 1/3 of 1% of the total surplus was offered for solving a problem around literacy, which I think is a commendable issue to be working on. Sadly, that bill was like getting 1 yard on 4th and 45. It did not do anything to get us where we need to go to help with education. On top of that, I inquired as to what the budget was for higher education, and that is 0.1%. So 1%, 0.1% of 1%, right? It was a very small amount. Again, woefully inadequate to meet the needs of our students and our systems. Yet we have a tax bill here in front of us today that just for the top 2% spends 5% of the surplus, not 0.5, but 5% of the surplus on the top 2% of income earners. Folks, I teach a couple of courses. You might have heard of them. I teach intercultural and interpersonal communication, and one of the things we talk about when we talk about who we are and becoming aware is we talk about how do we measure what we do. Mr. Chair, Mr. President.
Senators, if you could please keep your conversations low.
Thank you.
We'd appreciate, the Speaker would appreciate it. Thank you.
So we talk about in the lecture, how do we know who we are? What's our concept of self? And you know what the biggest indicator of that is? You are what you consistently do, folks. You are what you consistently do. Your values are stated by your behavior, not your rhetoric. Your values right now across the aisle by a number of like 50 to 1 is the top 2% over our kids and our schools. It's that simple. You can try to move the numbers around all you want, but the fact of the matter is 5% of the surplus is going to tax cuts to the richest 2% in the state, yet we can only afford collectively 0.4%, not 4%, 0.4% for education. That is the values. That is the message, the takeaway for what we see in this tax bill, period. And that's just in education. And let's just dive into that for a second. You know, over the past few years, I've had many good conversations with my friends across the aisle who've earnestly told me, you know what, if we just had money, I'd love to do something, our hands are tied. We don't have any money. We can't do anything. Our hands are tied. And so last night was quite the experience when that excuse is no longer available with the $9 billion surplus. That excuse doesn't exist anymore, folks. So instead, the chair just chose to stop answering my questions because there wasn't a good answer over and over again, right? And so that to me is concerning. While I do agree with the chair of E12's assessment about literacy, and I am pleased that $30 million is going into that, I think that's really important. That's just such a small piece of the overall puzzle. An important piece, but it's not even the biggest. What are we not doing in education when we have a bill like this in contrast to other bills? What are we not doing? Well, we're not doing the cross-subsidy, which we've heard talked about. We're not doing programming for special needs kids in our schools. We're not doing mental health supports. We're not bringing counselors into the schools. We're not providing for more nurses. Our nurse-to-student ratio right now should be criminal, in my opinion. It's ridiculous. We certainly still haven't, even though I've heard everybody in this room at least one time talk about how important career and technical education is, yet we still can't crack that nut, it seems like, except for the schools that have the biggest tax bases that can do it on their own, which then further exacerbates some of the achievement gap. And frankly, we haven't supported our paraprofessionals. You know, I watched my kids in elementary and kindergarten talk about what their school experience was. And I can tell you there's no question in my mind that our schools would have failed had we not had the dedicated professionals supporting our teachers. And yet we fund our schools so little they can't even be full-time employees with benefits. Think about that. Think about that. Any parent out there listening right now, those paraprofessionals, which are the backbone of helping keep our schools together and giving the teachers the opportunity to do their jobs, aren't even valued enough to be full-time people making a living wage and with benefits. But we do have enough money in our surplus to give a huge tax cut to the top 2%. I'm just one guy talking over here, right? And I get that there's many messages going on, and I'm sure we'll hear all kinds of excuses and reasons why things are happening the way they are in the tax bill, or there's a future bill coming. Let me dangle that in front of you. Hopefully it goes well. I'd love to see a future bill. I hope you're right about that. That'd be awesome. But the reality is this bill is a value statement for the Senate GOP. And your value is this. You value the top 2% more than you value our students, more than you value our teachers, more than you value our schools. And I'm not just saying that like I'm trying to impugn motives. I'm just looking at the data, the numbers of what you did, just making a comparison for you. And it's super disappointing. You know, every year that every session I've been in office, I've offered a middle-class tax cut. Sometimes to the chagrin of my own party. I've offered a tax cut that cuts the taxes on the first and second tiers and blinks off. Because if there's anybody that needs more money, it's the people that don't have them, that are living paycheck to paycheck. I can't get traction on that ever. Despite hearing my friends across the aisle talk about tax cuts, I offer them a bipartisan solution that will guarantee tax cuts to those that need it most, yet that falls on deaf ears. But here we are, 5% of the surplus going to the richest 2%. I find it difficult. You know, I want to be mad, but like my dad would say, but I'm just disappointed. I'm just disappointed. I hope we can do more than that. I hope that this is the beginning point, that this is actually just posturing, that we know we're going to be in a negotiation with the governor and the House, and I hope we come back and we do better for our people, for our kids. That's my biggest concern. My biggest concern is I want to make sure we make these schools whole. We're $1.4 billion behind due to inflation. And yes, Senator Nelson, I'd love to have the discussion to explain how that works, because I know you have a differing opinion, and I'd be happy to show you how this works. But the reality is we have a huge, huge shortfall. And we have an unbelievable opportunity to make that difference right now for so many kids across our state. Yet, we seem to be unwilling to do that. But we do have a tax bill that gives a huge surplus tax cut to the richest 2%. So I hope that we think about that. I'd love us to move forward and have an opportunity to maybe make some better choices about our tax dollars and support those that desperately need it. I am a no on this bill. Thank you.